Hi, welcome back to another podcast with Mr. Hagan. And on this podcast, we're going to continue to talk about cost curves. And we've talked about cost curves in two ways in previous podcasts. One, we've talked about the cost curves with respect to a specific level of production, and then we found the areas that represent our totals. That was the first thing that we did. And then the second thing we did is we looked at the general pattern of the graph. What is the general pattern of the graph? And we're going to put these two ideas together on this video, and we're going to get rid of numbers. So we're going to get more abstract. So here we were very concrete. We have specific numbers. Here we were very concrete. We had specific numbers and we calculated them and so on. And now what we want to do is we want to get abstract. So we're going to get abstract thinking about the general pattern, and then we're going to get abstract in terms of thinking about how to find these different boxes without any numbers. So to do that, I'm going to draw a graph, and I would encourage you to try to draw the graph as well. So you want to write this down, just kind of take notes on it while I do it. And so we have this graph, and first of all, on the horizontal axis of the graph is going to be my quantity. So that's going to be the level of the firm's output. That's quantity. And on the vertical axis is going to be dollars. Okay, and we're going to graph the average total, average variable, and marginal costs. So let's go ahead and graph those, remembering the general patterns. So what's some general patterns that we remember? Well, one thing is that we know that the marginal cost curve is going to slope down, hit a minimum, and then rise. So that's what I always like to draw first, is the marginal cost curve. It slopes down, hits a minimum, and then rises. That's my marginal cost curve. And then I'm going to draw, number two is I'm going to draw my average total cost curve. So my average total cost curve, that's also going to slope down, hit a minimum, and then rise. Okay, that's my average total cost curve. And it's really important when you draw this is to remember that the intersection point, that the marginal cost curve is going to intersect the average total cost curve at its lowest point. Okay, right there. That's really important. Okay, this average total cost curve, when you draw it, it has to intersect the marginal cost curve right here at its minimum point. So average total cost is going to come down, hit a minimum, where it intersects margin, and then rises. Okay, so let's get rid of those other things there. And let's draw another curve, and that's going to be my average variable cost. Excuse me, my average variable cost is also going to slope down, hit a minimum, and then rise. Now, there's a couple things to keep in mind with how I drew this average variable cost curve. There's a couple things to keep in mind. First thing is, again, it's going to slope down, but it's going to hit a minimum right where it intersects, right here, right where it intersects marginal cost. Okay, where the average variable cost intersects marginal cost is going to be at its lowest point. Also notice this. Also notice that the average variable cost has to get closer and closer to the average total cost curve as we go. Okay? Remember, they are asymptotic with respect to each other. The vertical distance is going to get smaller and smaller. So the average total and average variable are going to approach each other but never actually intersect. So they're both going to slope down, hit a minimum, and then rise. Slope down, hit a minimum, and then rise. Now, let me get rid of all that extra stuff there. So right now, we just want to focus now on what we have. We have a marginal cost curve, slopes down, hits a minimum, rise. Average total slopes down, hits a minimum right here, then rises. Average variable slopes down, hits a minimum right here, and then rises and gets closer and closer to average total as we go. Now, let's take our next step, which is we're going to choose a level of production. Now, how am I going to choose a level of production? Well, I don't really know how to do that yet. I can't do that until we start adding revenue to all of this, and that's not going to happen until some future videos. So let's just pick a level of output. It could be any level of output. Let's say that we produce right here. Let's say this is going to be the firm's level of production, so we're just going to call that Q1. We're going to call that Q1. And so then what do? Well, we get that tunnel vision that I talked about, and we're going to draw our vertical dotted line going up. So that's going to be our level of production. And then we come up to where we hit the average total cost curve, and we come across. And we're going to say that is my average total cost at this level of production. So we're going to call that average total cost 1. And then where we come up and hit the average variable cost, that's going to be, and let me just change my color up to do that. So when we come up and we hit the average variable cost curve and come over, that's going to be my average variable cost. That's going to be my average variable cost. So I'll call that AVC1. There's my average variable cost. Now, where's going to be my fixed costs? Well, remember, the fixed costs are going to be in between. The fixed costs are going to be in between. So the average fixed cost is the distance between average total and average variable. So that's going to be your average fixed cost. You could also find it right here is going to be your average fixed cost. Between average total and average variable is going to be your average fixed cost. So that's supposed to be a 1 right there, I'm sorry. So that's going to be your average fixed cost. Okay? Now, we don't need to draw a separate average fixed cost curve because it's right there already. It's in between the average total and the average variable. So we want to draw as few curves as possible. So we won't draw the average fixed cost curve because it's right there in between the two, in between average total and average variable. Now, where are my totals? Well, let's remember where my totals are. The totals are going to be the total cost, which we go from the average total cost, the height of this box, of this big box, is the average total cost multiplied by the base, which is the quantity, and so that will make your total cost. Okay, so that's going to be your total cost box is going to be that red box. That's going to be your total cost. And remember, we said the total cost, those are equal to, what's it equal to? The total cost is going to be equal to the average total cost 1, right there, multiplied by Q1. That's going to be your total cost right there. Okay, what about my total variable cost? Well, the total variable cost, where's that going to be? Well, that's going to be the height of the box going up to the average variable cost. That's right here on the vertical axis, up to average variable cost, multiplied by quantity, which is here on the horizontal axis, multiplied by Q1, and that will give me the area of this box, and the area of that box will be my total variable costs. Okay, so my total variable costs are equal to the average variable cost, AVC1, times my level of output, which is Q1. And then the last thing for us to find is going to be our total fixed cost. So where's my total fixed cost going to be? Well, my total fixed costs are equal to my average fixed cost, which is the difference between average total and average variable. So my total fixed costs are going to be this distance right here from average total down to average variable. That's going to be the height, multiplied by the base, which is my quantity right here. That's my Q1 right here. That's the base. Okay, and then when you make that box is going to be your total fixed cost. That's going to be your total fixed cost. So you take your total variable costs plus your total fixed costs, add those two boxes together, and you get your total costs. Okay, and then total fixed costs, okay, what's that equal to? That's equal to your average fixed costs, AFC1, that's right here, multiplied by Q1, and there it is. So what's pretty cool about this is by only drawing 3 graphs, but I should say it this way, by only drawing 3 curves, marginal cost, average total cost, and average variable cost, we can also find the fixed costs, and then the total cost, total fixed costs, and total variable costs. They're all there with only drawing 3 curves, So that's going to be really important. And that's what I mean by doing this in an abstract way. You've got to be able to draw these abstract graphs. That's a really big deal. All right, so in this video, we went from concrete to abstract, but we're still really doing the same thing that we were doing before, and that is using our averages to find our areas that represent our totals, All right, so this has been Mr. Hagan on another Econ podcast. Thanks for joining me, and we'll see you on the next podcast.